Worked since I was 15. Bought my first house at 25. Then my parents sued me to give it to my brother. My name is Daniel. I'm 27 now, but this story really begins when I was about 15. I have always been the kind of person who hates feeling like I owe anyone anything. Maybe that came from the way I grew up. In my parents' house, nothing ever felt truly free. Every meal, every ride, every favor, every small thing they did for us seemed to go onto some invisible scoreboard they kept in their heads. They would bring things up months later, sometimes even years later, as if they had been holding onto a receipt and waiting for the right moment to demand payment. It made me feel like even basic parenting was something I was supposed to earn. And when you are a teenager, that kind of thing leaves a mark. Money was always complicated in our house. My parents were not poor. They both had decent jobs. But my younger brother Ryan was the golden child. Ryan is 3 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, everything in our family seemed to orbit around him. Private soccer training, expensive camps, top-of-the-line clothes, new gear, special trips, extra chances. No matter how much something cost, Mom and Dad never seemed to hesitate when it was for Ryan. For me, things were different. If I wanted anything beyond the bare essentials, the answer was always either, "You don't need it," or "Get a job and buy it yourself." So that was exactly what I did. At 15, while Ryan spent his weekends playing in tournaments or hanging out with friends, I was bussing tables at a local diner. It was not glamorous. My hands smelled like dish soap and fryer grease, and by the end of a shift, my feet would ache so badly that I could feel every step on the walk home. But that job gave me something I had wanted for years. It gave me my own money. More importantly, it gave me independence. That first job led to another and then another. By the time I graduated high school, I had savings. Not a lot, but enough to help me pay for community college without asking my parents for a single cent. I remember my dad making some offhand comment about me thinking I was better than everyone else because I did not need their help. At the time, I laughed it off. I told myself it did not matter. I had done it on my own, and that was enough. But college was where the divide between me and my family became even bigger. While I was juggling classes and 2 part-time jobs, Ryan was finding himself, which apparently meant dropping out of college after 1 semester and spending the next few years working odd jobs, then quitting every time he didn't vibe with the management. My parents always had an excuse ready for him. He's just figuring things out. He has a lot of potential. You know Daniel. He's not like you. I started noticing the pattern more clearly as I got older. Anytime I achieved something, it was brushed off as no big deal. If I worked hard, that was just what I was supposed to do. If I paid my own bills, that was just me being stubborn. If I solved a problem on my own, it meant I was cold, distant, or arrogant. But if Ryan did the bare minimum, it became a family celebration. When I was 24, I landed a solid job in tech. It was not flashy at first, but it was stable, and it gave me a real path forward. I worked hard, learned everything I could, asked questions, stayed late, took on responsibilities no one else wanted, and slowly started climbing the ladder. Within a year, I was making enough money to think seriously about getting out of my cramped apartment. I did not tell my parents right away. I knew how they were. I knew that if I told them I was looking at houses, they would find a way to turn it into a lecture, a criticism, or somehow a conversation about Ryan. So I quietly started looking. Every open house felt surreal. I would walk through kitchens, bedrooms, empty living rooms, and back patios, and I kept thinking I was getting closer to something that had always felt impossible for someone like me. A home. Not a room I rented, not a place where I had to ask permission, not somewhere I could be made to feel like a burden. A home that was mine. The day I closed on my first house, I was shaking from excitement. It was not a mansion. It was not some giant luxury property, but it was mine. I had worked for every brick, every dollar of that down payment, every signature on those closing documents. I invited my parents and Ryan over for dinner as a surprise, because some part of me, even after everything, still wanted them to be proud. That was my first mistake. The moment they stepped inside, I could see it on my mom's face. She was not happy for me. She was calculating. Her eyes swept over the place like she was taking inventory. My dad made a joke about me secretly winning the lottery. Ryan barely said a word. He just walked around slowly, looking into rooms, opening doors, and acting like he was scoping the place out. The only genuine reaction I got was from my aunt, who came along with them. She kept saying how impressed she was, how nice the place looked, and how proud I should be. I remember clinging to that reaction because it was the only one that felt normal. Then we sat down to eat, and the comments started. "It's nice," my mom said, looking around the dining room. "But don't you think it's a bit much for someone your age?" "Yeah," Ryan chimed in. "You probably could have helped out with other things instead of splurging on this." I remember putting my fork down slowly. "What other things?" I asked. My mom gave me this look, like I was supposed to know exactly what she meant. "Your brother has been talking about going back to school," she said. "But you know how expensive that is. We thought maybe, well, you have this big house now. You could have chipped in a little to help him get a head start." It hit me like a slap. Not once had they asked if I needed help with my down payment. Not once had they offered to help with furniture bills, repairs, moving costs, or anything else. But now that I had something to show for myself, they had already mentally allocated part of it to Ryan. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I worked for this," I said. "I didn't take anything from you. Why should I be expected to pay for Ryan's choices?" The air went tense. My dad muttered something about family helping family. Ryan looked at me like I had personally betrayed him. My mom just stared, lips pressed together, as if I had failed some test she had been waiting to give me. I ended the dinner early. As they left, my mom gave me a hug, but it was not really a hug. It was more like a warning disguised as affection. She squeezed me tightly, leaned close, and whispered, "Don't be selfish, Daniel. We'll talk about this again." I thought maybe it would blow over. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, little comments started creeping into every conversation. My mom would call and say things like, "Ryan has been looking at classes, but we just can't make it work without some help." Or, "It's such a shame when people in the family have the means to help and just don't." My dad kept reminding me of everything they had done for me growing up, which was almost laughable considering how little they had actually supported me financially once I was old enough to work. Then came the final straw before everything exploded. One Sunday afternoon, I got a text from Ryan. "We need to talk. Come by." I figured maybe he wanted to apologize, or at least explain himself. When I showed up, my parents were there too, sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of them. College brochures, tuition breakdowns, financial aid information, and a proposal for how much I could reasonably contribute to Ryan's education over the next 4 years. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because it was so absurd. "You seriously made a payment plan for me?" I asked. "For my brother." My mom shot me a sharp look. "This is not a joke, Daniel. This is his future. If you care about family, you'll do this." Then Ryan, with absolutely no shame, said, "I mean, it's not like you don't have the money. You bought a whole house, man. Why should you get to have all that while I'm stuck here?" Something in me snapped that day. I stood up and told them I was not giving a single cent. Then I walked out. I thought they would be angry for a while. I thought maybe they would stop talking to me for a bit. I thought there would be guilt trips, silent treatment, and more family drama. I did not think they would go as far as they did next, because 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a lawyer, and when I read it, my hands started shaking all over again. But this time, it was not excitement. It was rage. I must have read that letter a dozen times before it actually sank in. My parents, my own parents, were suing me. The claim was something about willfully depriving a dependent family member of necessary opportunities. The dependent family member was Ryan, of course. They were framing it like I had somehow blocked him from getting an education, as if my refusal to fund his second attempt at college was the same thing as taking money away from him. It was so outrageous that I almost thought it had to be a bluff. The letter demanded a settlement, and the amount was suspiciously close to the total tuition costs they had shown me at the kitchen table. It also hinted at emotional damages Ryan had suffered because I had flaunted my success in his face. I remember sitting at my dining table with my coffee going cold beside me, staring at those pages and thinking, this cannot be real. Surely they would not actually go through with this. But they did. Within a week, my mom started calling me every day. Every call switched between guilt and anger. One day it was, "Daniel, you're tearing this family apart. Is a little generosity really worth losing us over?" The next day it was, "Your brother is devastated. He feels like you want him to fail." Sometimes she would cry on the phone for minutes at a time without saying anything, just letting me sit there in silence, listening to her breathe and sob, as if I was supposed to feel like I was crushing her. Ryan, meanwhile, doubled down on the entitlement. He started posting vague jabs on social media. Things like, Some people only care about themselves, even if it ruins other people's lives. With sad emojis and inspirational quotes about family loyalty. Of course, his friends and some of our extended family, most of whom did not know the full story, would comment things like, "That's so messed up," and "I'm so sorry you're going through this." It was like Ryan had built a little pity stage for himself, and he was milking it for everything it was worth. I started noticing the subtle ways my parents were twisting the narrative to relatives. At a cousin's birthday party, my aunt pulled me aside and said, "I just wish you and Ryan could work this out. He's been so down since you bought that house." I asked her what she meant. She said, "Well, your parents told us you refused to help him after making all this money." No mention of how I had been on my own since I was a teenager. No mention of how Ryan had already blown multiple chances. No mention of the payment plan they had made for me without my permission. Just the edited, family-friendly version that made me look cold and selfish. It got to the point where I started dreading family events. At my grandmother's Sunday lunch, I overheard my dad telling a neighbor, "Daniel has gotten too big for his boots. Forgot where he came from." I tried to let it roll off my back, but it was harder than I expected. I was not just being painted as the villain, I was being erased. Years of struggle. Every sacrifice I had made, every hour of overtime, every bill I had paid by myself, none of it counted. The only thing that mattered to them was that I was not bending to their will. Then, one night, Ryan showed up at my house unannounced. He did not even knock like a normal person. He just stood outside ringing the doorbell until I opened the door. He looked smug, like he had been waiting all day to deliver a line. "You know you're going to lose, right?" he said casually. "Mom and Dad have the lawyer and the family is on their side. It'll be easier if you just pay up now and save yourself the embarrassment." I could not believe the arrogance. I told him to leave. When he did not move, I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. We stood there on my front porch, him wearing that half smirk, me trying to keep my voice level. "You are not entitled to my money, Ryan," I said. "You've had chance after chance and you've thrown them away. This is on you, not me." That was when he said something that lodged itself deep in my brain. "You only got here because you had it easier than me," he said. "Mom and Dad were harder on me. I deserve a fair shot too." Easier. He actually thought my life had been easier. I stared at him for a long second before I answered. "If you think I had it easy, I said you weren't paying attention." Then I went back inside and locked the door. From that night on, things ramped up even more. My parents stopped calling me directly and started going through other people, aunts, uncles, even my grandmother. I would get voicemails like, "Sweetheart, your mom says this is just a misunderstanding. Maybe if you sent your brother a little something to get started, we could all move on." Or, "Daniel, you know your father's blood pressure isn't good. This stress isn't helping." Every single one was another attempt to wear me down. Meanwhile, the lawsuit kept moving forward. I had to hire my own lawyer just to defend myself from my own family. Every document that came through had their names on it, my parents, my brother, in black and white. It did not matter that the claim was absurd. It did not matter that I knew logically I had done nothing wrong. The emotional weight of it was crushing. At night, I would lie in bed and wonder how the same people who were supposed to protect me could turn into this. Then came the moment I realized they were not just trying to get money from me. They were trying to take something much bigger. It started with a voicemail from my realtor of all people. She sounded concerned. She said she had gotten a strange inquiry about my house, asking if it was available for purchase or rental because the current occupant might not be there much longer. She did not give me a name at first, but I did not need one. There were only 3 people who knew exactly how to hit me where it would hurt the most. I called my realtor back immediately, and she confirmed what I already suspected. The inquiry had not come from some random stranger. It had been my mother. My mother had actually called my realtor pretending to be a friend of the family and asked about my house as if she were just curious. But my realtor had sensed something odd and pressed her a bit. That was when my mom hinted that I might not be able to keep the property much longer, and that it would be a shame if it went to waste when another family member could use it. My chest tightened. Another family member. There was no mistaking who she meant. They were not just trying to get money out of me. They were setting the stage to take my house. I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand, staring out the window for what felt like hours. This was not just about favoritism anymore. This was not just Ryan being entitled or my parents guilt-tripping me. This was deliberate. They were making a calculated move to undermine everything I had worked for, the house I had fought to buy, the one symbol of independence I had from them, the first place that truly felt like mine. They were already circling it like vultures. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started clicking into place. That first dinner when I invited them over, the way my mom's eyes had scanned the place, the comment about it being a bit much for someone my age, Ryan's digs about me having all that while he was stuck at home. It had all been leading to this. The lawsuit was not just about tuition. If they could paint me as someone who had unfairly deprived Ryan, maybe they thought they could twist that into some kind of legal leverage over my assets, over my home. Then the real gut punch came. I got an email from my lawyer forwarding a newly filed amendment in their case. It claimed that part of the reason they were seeking damages was because the defendant's current living situation was acquired through funds that could have been allocated to support the plaintiff's education and career development. In other words, they were trying to argue that my house itself was evidence of my selfishness and misallocated resources. They were not just hinting at it now. They were putting it in legal writing. That night, I called my mom. I did not even plan what I was going to say. I just needed to hear her voice and understand how she could possibly justify this. She picked up after a few rings, and her voice was sickly sweet, like nothing was wrong. "Daniel," she said, "I was just telling your aunt how proud I am of you." "Cut it, Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "Why did you call my realtor?" There was a pause. Then, without missing a beat, she sighed. "I was just looking out for the family," she said. "If things don't go your way in court, it would be better if the house stayed with someone in the family instead of strangers. You know Ryan would take good care of it." I felt my jaw clench. "You're planning for me to lose my home before the case is even over," I said. "You've already decided I'm guilty." "It's not about guilt, Daniel. It's about doing what's right for your brother. He's been through so much." "So much," I cut in. "He's had every opportunity handed to him while I've been on my own since I was a teenager. I worked for this house. You never helped me, not once. And now you think you can just take it?" Her tone sharpened. "Don't be dramatic. You wouldn't be where you are without how we raised you. We made sacrifices too. This is your chance to give back." Give back. That phrase hit me like a brick. It was the same thing she had said when I was 16 and refused to hand over half my paycheck to help with household expenses while Ryan got to spend his allowance on video games. It was the same phrase she had used when I declined to co-sign a car loan for him when I was 21. To her, my success was not mine. It was a debt I owed them, one they could collect whenever they wanted. I hung up without saying another word. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. It was not just anger anymore. It was something deeper, something that made my stomach twist, a mix of betrayal and clarity. Because in that moment, I finally understood that they were never going to stop. It did not matter how much I explained. It did not matter how much I proved that I had built my life without their help. In their minds, Ryan's failures were my responsibility to fix, and anything I had was fair game. The only justice they believed in was the kind where Ryan came out on top, even if it meant tearing me down to nothing. The next week, things got worse. I found out from a mutual friend that Ryan had been bragging to a couple of his buddies that the house would be his soon. One of them apparently asked if I was selling, and Ryan smirked and said, "Not exactly. Let's just say Mom and Dad are handling it." Hearing that broke something in me. I had spent years swallowing little jabs. I had let them chip away at my achievements because I did not want to cause waves. I had ignored the favoritism, the guilt trips, the comments, the way they minimized me and inflated him. But now they were trying to strip me of the one thing that symbolized all those years of grinding, all those nights I had gone without so I could save for a future no one else believed in. That was when I made a decision. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But I was not going to fight it their way. I was going to make sure that when I pushed back, they regretted ever thinking they could take what was mine. The weeks that followed felt like walking through quicksand. Every day brought another blow. Another reminder that my own family had positioned themselves as my enemies. My lawyer was doing what he could, but every new filing from their side felt like a punch to the gut. The language was so cold and calculated. It was like they had erased me as a son and rewritten me as some faceless opponent they needed to beat in court. I stopped sleeping properly. Some nights I stared at the ceiling for hours while my mind ran in loops. What if they somehow won? What if they took the house? Where would I go? What would I have left? My home had always been my sanctuary. It was the first place where I could close the door and know no one could barge in and tell me what to do. But now, even sitting in my own living room felt tense. Like the walls were not fully mine anymore. My work started to suffer too. I caught myself zoning out in meetings. I missed deadlines because I was buried in legal paperwork and stress. My boss noticed, and while he was sympathetic when I told him it was a family legal matter, I could tell his patience would not last forever. I had worked so hard to build a reputation as someone reliable, someone who could handle anything thrown at him. Now I was watching that reputation crack. The worst part was the isolation. My parents had done such a good job of controlling the story that most of my extended family thought I was being cruel. Invitations to birthdays, dinners, and casual get-togethers started slipping through the cracks. I would see photos posted online, big smiling group shots with captions like, "Family first," and there would be Ryan, grinning in the middle, my parents standing on either side of him. I was not even mentioned anymore. One night, I opened my fridge and realized I had not done a proper grocery run in weeks. I had been living off takeout and whatever I could grab from the corner store because I did not have the energy to shop. Standing there in the dim refrigerator light, staring at a single carton of eggs and half a bottle of orange juice, I felt this wave of hopelessness wash over me. It was not just about the lawsuit. It was the feeling that no matter what I did, I would always be the outsider in my own family. But in that low moment, something else sparked too. I remembered being 15, standing behind the counter at the diner on a Friday night, my hands raw from scrubbing dishes, knowing I had to wake up early for a double shift the next day. I had done that for years without a safety net, without anyone cheering me on, without anyone telling me they were proud. Every single step I had taken since then had happened because I refused to give up when quitting would have been easier. That was when I decided I was not going to let them take everything from me. I stopped answering their calls. I told my lawyer to handle all communication no matter how trivial, so I would not have to hear their voices or read their manipulative messages anymore. I quietly went through my finances and made sure every asset I had was locked down. I secured every account. I pulled my credit report to check for anything suspicious. I installed a security system on my house in case Ryan decided to show up again. In public, I played it calm. If anyone asked how I was doing, I would just say, "handling it," and change the subject. But privately, I was building something, a plan, because I realized that if I fought them head-on, they would keep trying to twist the story until I looked like the aggressor. They would make me look cruel, angry, ungrateful, and greedy. I needed to be smarter. I needed to let them dig their own hole and then make sure they could not climb out of it. The first step was gathering proof, not just for court, but for myself. Proof of every manipulative call, every backhanded comment, every attempt to undermine me. Every message, every voicemail, every document. If I was going to fight back, I wanted all of it in black and white. Still, I kept my head down. Outwardly, it looked like they had beaten me into silence. Maybe that was what they believed. And that was exactly what I wanted them to think. Because when you are at rock bottom, no one sees you coming back. And I was going to make sure my return hit them harder than they ever expected. It is strange how once you stop feeding someone's drama, they start thinking you have disappeared. My parents and Ryan seemed to take my silence as proof that they were winning. In reality, that silence gave me the space I needed to rebuild. Not just my defenses, my life. The first change came at work. My boss called me into his office one afternoon, and I braced myself for bad news. I thought he was going to tell me I had dropped the ball too many times. I thought this was where the lawsuit would spill into my career and cost me yet another thing I had worked for. Instead, he closed the door and said, "Look, I don't know what's going on in your personal life, but I know you're good at what you do. If you can focus, I'm willing to put you on a project that could lead to a promotion." It felt like someone had cracked open a window in a stuffy room, a rush of fresh air. I threw myself into that project. Long hours, meticulous planning, extra research, careful communication, going the extra mile even when no one asked. I was not just trying to prove myself to my boss, I was reminding myself what I was capable of. And it worked. The project was a success. A few weeks later, I was offered the promotion. Along with it came a significant pay bump, enough that my financial cushion grew thicker and my savings felt healthier. It did not erase the stress of the lawsuit, but it made me feel secure again. Meanwhile, my lawyer was quietly picking apart their case. He managed to get records of Ryan's past employment history, his previous failed college attempts, and even messages where my parents admitted they had spoiled him too much. Each piece was another thread in the fabric of their hypocrisy. I did not gloat. Not yet. I just filed it all away and let it pile up. Outside of work, I started focusing on myself again. I rejoined the gym I had quit months earlier, partly to clear my head, and partly to remind myself that my body did not have to carry the full weight of this stress forever. I started cooking real meals again. Nothing fancy, but there was something therapeutic about chopping vegetables, heating a pan, and actually sitting down to eat food I had made for myself. I also began reconnecting with people I had drifted away from, not the family members who had bought into my parents' version of events. I left them to their group photos and fake smiles. I reached out to old friends, coworkers I trusted, and people who knew me without the filter of my family's gossip. Little by little, I rebuilt a circle around me that was not poisoned by their manipulation. Then, something unexpected happened. I was invited to speak at a local networking event for young professionals. Someone had seen the results of my project at work and thought my career path was inspiring. Standing on that stage and telling my story, the professional one, not the messy personal parts, I realized something. I was not that powerless kid bussing tables anymore. I had built something. And no matter what my family thought they could take from me, they could not take that. With every win, big or small, I felt the balance shifting. My parents still had their lawsuit, but outside of that courtroom, their control over me was slipping. They could not guilt me into calls I would not answer. They could not twist my words if I did not give them any. They had to go through lawyers for everything now, which meant no more surprise ambushes at my front door, and no more accidental confrontations disguised as family concern. The best part was that while they were busy burning bridges with me, they were also wearing down their own credibility. A mutual acquaintance let slip that some relatives were starting to question why my parents were dragging me through court instead of helping Ryan get his life together. Apparently, Ryan had been bragging so openly about getting the house that even people on their side were starting to see how bad it looked. That was when I knew I was not just surviving anymore. I was gaining ground. My career was stronger. My finances were secure. I had allies who saw through the lies. I was finally in a position where I did not have to react to their moves. I could plan my own. And as much as I wanted to strike back immediately, I forced myself to wait. Because timing, I realized, was everything. Let them think I was just living my life. Let them think I was moving on. Let them keep underestimating me. Because the next time I made a move, it would not just protect what was mine, it would expose exactly who they were. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon of all days. I was leaving a client meeting when my phone buzzed with an email from my lawyer. The subject line read, "Discovery request. Opposing counsel error." Inside was a forwarded thread. My parents' lawyer had accidentally copied my attorney on an email chain that was meant to stay internal on their side. And inside that thread was a goldmine. Most of the chain was logistics, timelines, filing deadlines, scheduling notes. But buried halfway down was a message from my mother to their lawyer that made my pulse quicken. She had written, "We need to make sure Daniel's house is included in any settlement. Ryan has already been in touch with a realtor friend who can list it as soon as it's signed over. This is the cleanest way to ensure he gets a fresh start." There it was, in writing. Proof that the lawsuit had never truly been about helping Ryan get an education. It was about transferring my house into his name. My lawyer practically hummed with energy when we spoke that evening. "This changes everything," he said. "They've essentially admitted to ulterior motives. We can use this." But I did not want to just use it to defend myself. I wanted to turn it into the foundation of something bigger, something that would end their ability to pull this stunt ever again. Around the same time, work presented me with another opportunity. My promotion had put me in charge of a small team. But now I was being offered a cross-department leadership role on a high-visibility project. It came with two major perks: significantly more income and connections with senior executives in industries far beyond my current reach. The kind of people who could, if necessary, open doors I did not even know existed. I accepted without hesitation. Not only did the new role strengthen my financial position even more, It also gave me flexibility. It gave me the ability to quietly channel resources where I wanted them. One of the first things I did was hire a private investigator. I did not want anything illegal or invasive. I did not want drama for the sake of drama. I wanted the truth. I wanted to know exactly what Ryan had been doing while his future supposedly hung in the balance. I also wanted to know whether my parents had a history of pulling similar moves with other relatives. The investigator did not disappoint. 2 weeks later, I had a thick folder on my desk. Inside were social media posts from accounts Ryan thought were private. They showed him on trips buying expensive electronics and even test driving cars. During the same months he had been claiming he was barely scraping by. There were also property records showing that years earlier, my parents had tried to pressure my late aunt into selling them a piece of land for a fraction of its value. It had caused a rift no one talked about anymore. The more I read, the clearer my path became. I did not need to just win the case. I needed to dismantle the narrative they had built, piece by piece, in front of an audience that mattered. To do that, I started laying groundwork quietly. I reached out to a few trusted family members who had stayed neutral, sharing just enough to plant seeds of doubt about my parents' version of events. I made sure my financial records, employment history, proof of tuition payments, proof of independence since I was a teenager, and property purchase documents were neatly organized, time-stamped, and ready to be shown to anyone who mattered. And that incriminating email chain was not the only mistake they made. My private investigator managed to uncover a conversation that had been recorded legally in a public setting. In it, Ryan was bragging to a friend at a bar that he had finally found a way to cash in on having a rich brother. The friend laughed and asked if I had agreed to it. Ryan replied, "No, man. Mom and Dad are making it happen. Once it's mine, I'll sell the place and be set for years." I listened to that recording 3 times in a row. Each time, I felt the same cold clarity settle in. They thought they were closing in on me. In reality, they had already handed me the tools to break them wide open. All I had to do was choose the perfect moment to pull the pin. I waited, not because I was hesitant, because I knew the most devastating strike was not always loud or angry. Sometimes it was quiet, precise, perfectly timed. My parents and Ryan were still moving full steam ahead with their case, completely oblivious to the fact that they had already laid the groundwork for their own undoing. The court date was approaching, and with it came the pretrial conference, the meeting where both sides would lay out their strongest positions and see whether a settlement was possible. That was my stage. When we walked into the conference room, my parents were already there, with Ryan sitting smugly between them. My mother gave me that self-satisfied smile she used when she thought she had the upper hand. My dad avoided my eyes, performing that silent show of disappointed authority he loved so much. Ryan leaned back in his chair like he was already signing the deed to my house. The mediator began with pleasantries, then asked my lawyer to speak first. We had agreed beforehand. No emotion, no long speeches. Just fact. My lawyer slid a thin binder across the table to their side. This, he said, is the complete documentation of my client's financial independence since age 15. Employment records, tax returns, proof of tuition payments, and property purchase receipts. You'll note that not a single cent came from his parents at any point. Ryan snorted quietly. My lawyer did not pause. He flipped the binder open to a flagged page, and here he said evenly is an email from the plaintiffs, in their own words, confirming that this lawsuit's primary goal is to obtain the defendant's home for transfer to another party. My mother's face drained of color so quickly, it was almost comical. My dad pressed his lips into a thin line. Ryan sat forward, trying to read the page, his confidence wobbling for the first time. And lastly, my lawyer said, pressing a button on his laptop, a short audio clip. Ryan's voice filled the room. "No, man. Mom and Dad are making it happen. Once it's mine, I'll sell the place and be set for years." Silence. You could hear the ticking of the wall clock. My lawyer let the silence hang for a good 5 seconds before he spoke again. "Given these facts, we believe the court will not only dismiss the case, but will find grounds for a countersuit for damages, including legal fees and reputational harm." The mediator cleared his throat and looked at their lawyer. "Do you wish to respond?" Their lawyer's face was tight. His jaw moved like he was chewing on nails. He leaned toward my parents and whispered urgently. My mother shook her head quickly, her eyes darting to me with something that looked almost like fear. Ryan muttered something under his breath that made my dad glare at him. Finally, their lawyer straightened up. We'll need a moment to discuss this privately. They left the room. I sat there with my hands folded, not saying a word. Inside, I felt a strange, satisfying calm. The kind that comes when you know the fight is already over. 10 minutes later, they came back in. Their expressions were carefully blank. "We're willing to withdraw the lawsuit," their lawyer said stiffly, with each party covering their own legal fees. My lawyer did not even look at me before replying. "That's unacceptable. We have clear evidence of malicious intent and will proceed with our countersuit unless we receive a written apology, a public retraction of all prior statements made against my client, and full reimbursement of his legal costs." Ryan's head snapped toward my parents. "We're not." "Yes, we are," my mother cut in, her voice tight. And that was it. In that room, they caved. I did not raise my voice. I did not gloat. I did not even look at Ryan as he sat there fuming. I let the paperwork speak for me. By the end of the week, I had the apology letter in my inbox. It was clumsy and awkward, an obvious attempt to sound sincere without really knowing how. The reimbursement check cleared shortly after, but that was not the true revenge. The real blow landed when I sent copies of the apology and the incriminating evidence to the handful of relatives who had iced me out over the past year. No long explanation, no emotional rant. Just the documents. Within days, the phone calls started coming. Not from my parents, but from those same relatives. The ones who had believed the edited version. The ones who had excluded me. The ones who had looked at me like I was the selfish one. Now they were awkwardly checking in, clearly realizing they had bet on the wrong horse. I did not answer most of them, because the point of revenge, I realized, was not to win them back. It was to make sure they understood that I did not need them, and that trying to take me down had only made me stronger. The fallout was fast, and it was ugly. For once, none of it was mine to deal with. Word of what had happened spread through the family faster than I expected. My aunt, the one who had been so impressed with my house the day they first saw it, called me sounding half angry and half stunned. "They tried to take your home from their own son." She was not the only one. Cousins, uncles, even my grandmother. People who had stayed silent before were suddenly talking. The family group chat I had been quietly removed from months earlier turned into a battlefield. Screenshots of the apology letter started appearing. Every time someone tried to defend my parents, another relative would drop a quote from the email or mention the recording of Ryan bragging about selling my house. For the first time in my life, the golden image my parents had built for themselves cracked in public. They stopped showing up to family gatherings, not because they were not invited, because they could not stand the questions. My mother, who had once loved being the center of attention, started avoiding calls from her own siblings. My dad became quieter, grayer somehow. He was no longer the booming, self-assured man who used to laugh at my independence like it was some kind of defect. And Ryan took it the hardest. His so-called friends, the same ones he had bragged to about cashing in, started distancing themselves. Without the house, without the settlement, and without the pity narrative, he had nothing to show for the months he had spent circling me like a shark. I heard through the grapevine that he moved out of my parents' house for a while, then quietly returned when rent and bills proved too much. The smugness I had seen in his eyes at that pretrial conference was gone. Now, when our paths occasionally crossed at some unavoidable family obligation, he barely made eye contact. The check they sent me covered every cent of my legal fees. But the apology letter was what I kept. I tucked it away in a drawer. Not because I needed the validation. I did not. I kept it because it was proof. Proof that no matter how much they tried to rewrite history, there was one moment when they had to admit they were wrong. I did not seek reconciliation. I did not move past it for the sake of family harmony. Instead, I built further on the life I had already been creating. Work kept growing. My circle of trusted friends stayed tight. My home remained exactly where it belonged, mine. Sometimes when I sit on my porch in the quiet of the evening, I think about that first dinner when I invited them over. Back when I still thought they might be proud. I think about how quickly the masks came off when they saw what I had built without them. And I realized that the real victory was not just keeping my house. It was not just winning the case. It was proving beyond any doubt that I never needed them to succeed. And no matter what they tried, they could never take that away from me. That is when I lean back, smile to myself, and think, this home will never have their name on it.